They say the house has been there since before the war. No one really knows which one. It just sat there, rotting quietly in the woods, like a wound the town didn't want to look at. I'd heard about it plenty of times growing up around Tillamook, Oregon, tucked away off a forgotten gravel road that used to lead somewhere but no longer did. Folks called it the Hollow House, like it had a name of its own, and most people were happy to let the woods take it back. But I'm not most people. My name's Ethan Harper. I'm 34 now, working as a building inspector for the county. I've always had a thing for abandoned places. There's something raw about them, like peeling back the skin of time to see what was left behind. On one particular Thursday afternoon, I wrapped up work early and figured I'd finally check out the old house myself. It wasn't far, just a mile or so into the trees from a half-paved turnoff south of town. I packed light, flashlight, gloves, a small camera in case I saw something worth documenting. Didn't bother calling anyone. I'd explored bigger and worse places before, and this one felt tame in comparison. Familiar, almost boring. The road in was damn near gone. Nature had swallowed the gravel drive whole, and the trees leaned in like they'd grown tired of waiting and decided to finish the job themselves. I walked about 6 minutes before I spotted the roof through the mossy pines. The house looked exactly like you'd expect. 2 stories of cracked wood, a collapsed porch corner, vines clawing at the windows. No garage, just bones and silence. I stepped up to a broken window near the front and leaned in. The smell hit me first. Not death, just time, mold, dust, damp wood that had long since given up the fight. I held still, listening. Nothing. No creaks, no movement, just wind. The front door was already ajar. I pushed it gently and it opened without a sound, like it was waiting for me. Inside, the air was thick, stale. Furniture still sat where it had always been, like the people who lived here had just walked out one afternoon and never came back. An old floral couch sagged in the middle, springs exposed. Picture frames lay shattered across the floor, their glass long broken, but their contents water-stained and barely visible. A family of 4. Smiles frozen in time. I wandered slowly through the first floor, brushing cobwebs aside and letting my flashlight scan every corner. The wallpaper peeled like sunburned skin. Kitchen chairs were still tucked under the table. There was even a coffee mug by the sink, half beat with what looked like tar. I should have turned back. I should have left, then and there. But I didn't. The stairs looked like they'd give out with a strong wind, but they held, barely. Each step screamed beneath my boots. The second floor opened up to a narrow hallway with 2 doors, one open, one closed. The open door led to an empty bedroom. No furniture, no carpet, just floorboards and dust. I stepped in and did a slow circle with my light, taking in the bare walls. It was the first space in the house that felt wrong. Hollow, just like the name. Then I heard it. A thud, heavy and deliberate, from downstairs. My pulse kicked up. I turned off the flashlight and held my breath. Nothing, just silence again. I waited. 10 seconds, 20. Then I bolted. The stairs felt longer on the way down. I hit the bottom and spun in place, light dancing across the ruined walls, looking for anything, anyone. But the house was still again. No footsteps, no doors creaking, not even the wind. But something had changed. The front door. I had left it wide open. Now it was closed, firmly shut. I rushed to it and grabbed the handle. It wouldn't budge. Locked. I pulled harder. Nothing. Like someone had bolted it from the outside. I froze. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. Someone else had to be here. I backed away from the door, sweeping the flashlight around. I whispered out loud, "Hello?" My voice sounded pathetic in the dark. No answer. That's when the panic set in. Not fear, not yet. Pure physical panic. I turned toward the broken window I'd peeked through earlier and didn't think twice. I ran and launched myself out. The glass caught my arm on the way through, but I didn't stop. I hit the dirt, scrambled up, and sprinted into the woods like hell was on my heels. I shut off the flashlight as I ran, weaving through trees, crashing through branches, trying not to trip. I didn't stop until I saw it. Flickering red and blue through the brush. Police lights. 2 squad cars crawling up the overgrown driveway toward the house. Their tires barely made it through the thicket. I dropped to my knees behind a tree and watched. They weren't in a hurry. No sirens, just methodical, intentional. I knew, somehow, I wasn't why they were there. I stayed hidden, biting down on my own breath while the officers disappeared through the front door. I wanted to stay, to see what they were looking for, what they might drag out, but I couldn't. Something inside me screamed that I didn't belong there anymore. I turned and left the way I came, staying off the path. I didn't stop until I saw my truck parked back on the main road. For weeks after, I checked the news. Nothing. No articles. No arrests. No statement from the sheriff's office. Like it never happened. I even went to the county records office, tried to find the name of the last person who owned the place. The file was there, but blank past 1991. No sale. No death certificate. Just an address and an empty signature line. Whatever happened in that house, whatever made the cops show up like that, they buried it. Sometimes late at night, I think about what would have happened if I hadn't jumped through that window. If I'd stayed just 5 minutes longer, who or what I might have seen. But I don't go looking anymore. That part of me died a little that day. Some places aren't just abandoned, some are forgotten on purpose. Some stories don't end when you run away. They linger. They root inside you like something parasitic, coiled and waiting. That's what the house in the hollow did to me. Even now, I still dream about the door being shut, about the dead air and the silence just before it happened. I told myself I was done with places like that. No more detours into decay. But fear doesn't kill curiosity. It just mutates it. That's why, 4 months later, I found myself driving through Missouri to visit an old friend, Marcus Dell. We hadn't seen each other in over a year. He was finishing his final semester in mechanical engineering at Wash U and invited me down for a weekend. I didn't tell him anything about Oregon. I didn't want to. But the irony is, Marcus had his own story, one he hadn't told anyone either, not until that weekend. Not until we were sitting on the roof of his apartment, sipping whiskey, talking about all the weird places we used to explore when we were younger. That's when he said, "There's something I should tell you, about a factory and someone inside it." At first I thought he was messing with me, but when I looked at his face I saw the same look I saw in the mirror after the hollow house. Wide eyes, distant stare, a hesitance like he wasn't sure if the words should ever leave his mouth. So he told me everything, and now I'm telling you, because some stories shouldn't be kept buried. It happened about a year ago. Marcus and his roommates, Riley and Sam, were big into what they called industrial tourism, which basically meant poking around old facilities, silos, power stations, and factories that had been shut down and left to rot. One Friday, they were all off work and decided to check out a decommissioned manufacturing plant just outside the city. Riley had found it online, one of those urban exploration forums where people post coordinates, creepy stories, and blurry photos taken with broken phones. The place had been closed since the mid-80s, according to the post. Supposedly haunted, definitely dangerous, but that's exactly why they went. They drove out late afternoon, stopped at a gas station a block away, parked the car, and walked the rest of the way in. Marcus said the street felt like it didn't belong to the world anymore. Empty, hollowed out, no cars, no people, just old brick buildings and shattered glass. The factory itself loomed over them like something ancient and angry. Steel beams jutted out from the walls, and the place was covered in graffiti, tags in places you'd have to be a contortionist to reach. The chain-link fence surrounding the building was topped with rusted barbed wire, but someone had already done the hard work. Sections of it had been clipped and peeled back like torn skin. They crawled through and made their way to the front entrance, a massive metal door hanging halfway off its hinges. Marcus said the moment they stepped inside, it felt like the building inhaled. The temperature dropped. The wind outside slipped through the metal shell, causing the entire structure to groan and creak like it hated being awake. They turned on their flashlights, cheap ones barely strong enough to cut through the dark, and started exploring the main floor. Rusted machines lined the space like prehistoric beasts. Conveyor belts, crumpled toolboxes, a half-toppled crane in the corner. The air stank of grease and mildew. They split up without realizing it, each of them wandering through different paths between machines. Marcus eventually found himself near a hallway at the far end of the room. He glanced back and saw someone standing by one of the machines. Not close enough to recognize, but close enough to assume it was Sam or Riley. He figured they saw him, so he kept going. The hallway was narrow and cold. The air changed, denser, still. He found another door, pushed it open, and stepped into a secondary chamber, some kind of loading bay or workshop. More machinery, more rust, and above him, a catwalk stretched across the ceiling, ending at a metal ladder bolted to the far wall. He stood there for a while, sweeping his light across the room. That's when he heard it. Footsteps behind him back in the hallway. Steady. Human. The door behind him opened and then closed. He turned around, expecting to see one of his friends, but there was no one there. He called out, but no answer. He walked back to the hallway and shined his flashlight. Nothing. The hall was dead empty. Then he heard something behind him, a scrape on the concrete. He spun back around. Standing 6 feet away was a man, if you could call him that. Marcus said he looked like he'd been pulled from a swamp. Long tangled hair, wild beard, skin stretched thin over sharp bones, and eyes that didn't blink. Dead eyes, glazed and wide. He didn't speak, he just charged. Marcus slammed the door and ran. He didn't look back. He hit the main floor and screamed for Sam and Riley. They came sprinting out from different directions, completely confused. He didn't stop to explain, just shouted for them to get out. They bolted, all 3 of them, scraping over the fence, sprinting past the gas station, jumping into the car. Marcus didn't say a word until they were halfway back to the apartment. When he finally told them what happened, Sam went pale. "I thought I saw someone," he admitted, "by the machines. Just standing there." Riley hadn't seen anything, but when they compared timelines, they realized the guy had probably been inside before they even arrived, just waiting. Marcus said it still keeps him up some nights. The man's eyes, the way he ran without hesitation, like he wasn't just chasing, like he was hunting. I sat there on the roof in silence after Marcus finished. I didn't need to ask him if it was true. I knew it was. Not just from the look on his face, but because something inside me recognized the fear. The kind you only know after you've been somewhere you shouldn't have survived. Places like that, they aren't just buildings. They remember. They wait. They hold on to things we're not supposed to understand. And sometimes, they let something else crawl out with you. After Marcus told me what happened at the factory, we sat on his apartment rooftop until the whiskey turned warm and the stars stopped flickering. I didn't sleep much that night. Between the hollow house and his story, I kept thinking about how close we'd both come to something that didn't feel entirely human. It made me wonder how many others had felt that same dread and never told a soul. But I didn't have to wonder long, because a few weeks later, I got a message from a kid named Liam Torres. He'd found my blog, the one I'd kept before everything went dark, and said he had something he needed to tell someone. He wasn't asking for answers. He just wanted to be heard. So, I called him. He sounded young, probably no more than 17. His voice was steady but quiet, like someone who didn't fully trust that the world around him was real anymore. He told me what happened during winter break. I wrote it all down, and now I'm telling you. It was just before Christmas in a small town in northern Pennsylvania. One of those old mill towns that never recovered when the jobs left. Liam and his best friend Dean had grown up there, and like most kids with nothing to do, they spent a lot of time wandering around. There was always one place they avoided though, Willow Church. Everyone knew it, even if they didn't talk about it much. It sat at the end of a cracked, overgrown road just outside the tree line, long abandoned, swallowed by brush and silence. It wasn't just the building, it was the way it felt, the way it watched. Kids used to dare each other to get close, but no one ever actually went inside. Until that night. Liam said it started like any other evening. He and Dean were hanging out at his house, playing video games and complaining about how boring the break was. Eventually, the conversation drifted to the church. Liam doesn't know why. Maybe the stillness of winter made everything feel less threatening. Maybe they just got tired of wondering. Either way, they grabbed their coats, their phones, and started walking. It was dark out, but the snow on the ground and the bright moon above made it easy to see. The walk was long, quiet. Their boots crunched over ice and broken branches. No one else was out. By the time they reached the old road, even the distant glow of town lights had disappeared. The road itself was a mess. Roots breaking through the pavement, vines wrapped around long dead street lamps. The church appeared slowly, like it was forming out of the darkness, and when they finally stood in front of it, Liam said it looked different than he remembered. Bigger, sharper. The fence that once surrounded it had almost vanished beneath years of overgrowth. They found a section that had caved in and stepped through. The front doors were massive, wooden, and warped with time. When they pushed, one of them groaned open, dragging across the floor like it didn't want to move. Inside was dead quiet, colder than outside. The room opened up into a large nave lined with pews that stretched toward a raised altar. Stained glass windows sat high above, dark and fractured, but what really struck them was how untouched it looked. No graffiti, no broken benches, no garbage, just dust. Stillness. Liam and Dean stood at the entrance for a while, barely talking. Their footsteps echoed through the vaulted ceiling with each careful movement. Eventually, they began walking slowly down the center aisle, lights from their phones cutting across the wooden floor and casting long shadows. When they reached the altar, Liam stepped up and turned around, looking out at the empty seats like he was standing in front of a silent audience. Dean stayed a few steps behind. Then it happened. A sound, loud, sudden, a heavy thud that echoed through the entire church like a dropped body. It didn't come from any one place. It seemed to come from everywhere. They both jumped, spun around, lights scanning the walls and ceiling. Nothing. Dean whispered, "What the hell was that?" Liam didn't have an answer. They stood frozen for nearly a minute before Dean pointed to a door off to the side, near the front. "Maybe something fell over in there," he said, trying to make sense of it. They walked over, hesitated, then opened it. The room behind the door was smaller, some kind of storage or meeting area. There were stacks of chairs, a dusty old piano, and boxes piled along the walls. They stepped inside. That's when they heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, walking the same aisle they had just come down. Liam said it sounded exactly like their own steps had sounded just minutes earlier, but heavier and wrong. They turned off their lights and peered through the narrow crack between the door and the frame. The church outside was dark, but they could still hear the footsteps. Closer now. Then, for a split second, something moved across their field of view. A shape, a figure, human, walking toward the main door. No flashlight, no sound, just walking. The footsteps stopped. The silence stretched. Then the front door creaked slowly and clicked shut. They didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood there, listening to the silence settle back into place like dust. After 5 minutes, maybe 10, they finally opened the door and stepped out. The church was empty again. No signs of anyone, no footprints in the dust, nothing. They didn't speak, they just ran. Out the front, through the fence, down the ruined road, and back into town. Liam said he didn't sleep that night. Couldn't, because as he replayed what happened, something didn't make sense. There was only one door at the far end of the church, the one they'd come through. There were no exits behind the altar, no stairwells, no cloisters. And yet that figure had come from that exact direction, from behind the altar, from right where Liam had been standing just minutes before. He told me, "I keep thinking, if we hadn't gone into that side room, if we had stayed just a little longer, maybe it wouldn't have left." And I believed him. I believed every word, because sometimes the quietest places aren't empty, they're waiting. As the writer and curator behind Enigma of the Unknown, I've spent countless hours listening to people, ordinary people, share experiences that defy logic and explanation. Ethan, Marcus, and Liam never set out looking for horror. They weren't thrill seekers chasing ghosts. They were curious, like many of us, drawn to silence, drawn to forgotten places. But what they found wasn't just decay or mystery, it was something aware, something that watched them long before they ever stepped foot inside. And that's the lesson. Not all abandoned places are empty. Sometimes the structures we think time has left behind haven't truly been abandoned at all. They breathe in stillness. They remember. And if you're not careful, they might remember you. Whether it's an old house hidden in the woods, a factory swallowed by rust, or a church cloaked in unnatural quiet, these places are not just backdrops for ghost stories. They're warnings. And if you take one thing from the stories of Ethan, Marcus, and Liam, let it be this: when a place feels wrong, trust that feeling. Leave. Don't go back. It doesn't matter how rational you are. It doesn't matter if nothing technically happens. The worst parts of these stories weren't the screams or the chases. It was the silence. The moments when something unseen shared the room with them. When they realized, too late, they weren't alone. To those who explore forgotten corners of America, who find beauty in ruin and story in silence, I understand the pull. I really do. But remember, curiosity is powerful, and so is darkness. Don't let your fascination blind you to the very real danger that can lie just beyond the threshold. And finally, to you, the listener and supporter of Enigma of the Unknown, thank you. Your time, your attention, and your trust mean everything to this channel. Whether you listen late at night, during long drives, or while the rain taps softly against your windows, I want you to know I'm grateful for each moment you spend with these stories. Every share, comment, and message fuels what we do. If these stories unsettled you, good, they were meant to. But if they stayed with you, echoed somewhere in the back of your mind when you passed an old building or walked alone at night, then remember, the unknown is never as far away as we think. Stay safe, stay curious, and most of all, stay out of the dark.